Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Tatiana Cook. I'm a principal product manager on the AWS Outpost team, and I've been with the team since before Outpost Racks were available, so I've had the chance to hear from a lot of different customers, understand a lot about what people are trying to do at the edge with AWS. And one of the most common questions that I have gotten during my time working on the team is why Outposts were so big. So historically, we've offered Outposts in a 42U rack form factor, and I'll show you some photos of what that looks like later. But what I'm here to talk about today, and I couldn't be more thrilled about, is the launch of our Outposts 1 and 2U servers, which are now generally available. What we'll be talking about today is what the Outpost service is, why we introduced 1 and 2U form factors, and what customers will typically use them for. And I'll be joined later by Atif Qureshi, who's the founder of Vistry AI, one of our launch partners, and Josh Cohen, our lead solution architect for the Outpost Server program. And they'll tell you about how Outpost servers can help AWS customers design and deploy solutions at the edge. Now, a lot of customers, when they hear kind of like hybrid AWS, are confused because typically they think of the cloud as being something that runs really far away, that they don't see or interact with on premises. But today we'll be talking more about some of the very good reasons that our customers have that they might not want to run everything in an AWS region or an availability zone. We'll touch upon Outpost servers, the design, the experience. I'll talk you through how you can get started, so when everyone is super excited, leaves the room, and is ready to press the buy button, you can go out and do that right away. And then we'll talk about designing for the edge. So some of you guys here or watching the presentation online may work at an organization that's all in on the cloud. You're happy with the latency and the processing that you get when you run in the AWS region. But we also hear from a lot of customers who say, I need sub 10 millisecond latency for at least some of the areas where I want to use AWS services. That could be a factory location where you're interacting with on-premises equipment. It could be a healthcare site where you're trying to provide patients with really fast care, even though you're analyzing a large image. We also hear from customers who have various reasons that they would want to process data locally. They might be ingesting a lot of data, and it's expensive for them to send all of that off premises, or they could be subject to a regulation that requires that they keep information within a certain geographic area. In the past, people have gone and they've procured hardware, they've implemented a virtualization solution, and then they've managed a large team to go out and tweak that, make sure that updates are happening, that they're deploying things on premises. We've heard that this isn't the most awesome experience all of the time, because it means that you have to wait a really long time to procure all of these different pieces. You have to coordinate bringing them together. And then your developers have to be aware of what parts of your infrastructure you're deploying a solution to, because things could look very different on premises than they do when you're running them in the cloud. The impact for your business may be that you can't innovate as fast as you'd like to, because it takes you a really long time to coordinate that IT, that procurement. Your developers are grumpy because they had to build something in the cloud, and now you want to bring it to the edge. They have to approach that whole problem differently. You may even have kind of two different teams who don't work particularly well together because they're trying to solve this problem independently. And what that ends up doing is it means you want to try something new. It's going to take you a long time and a lot of resources to try that both in the cloud and on site. So that's why if you're attending some of our hybrid sessions this week, you're starting to see much more of a cloud continuum from AWS. Of course, that starts in the region. We think the region is a great place to be. I am not going to convince you to move things out of the region if you like it. Please stay there. However, you may be operating in a metro area and starting to think, I could use a little bit more infrastructure on premises. You're exploring outposts. You're thinking about things like local zones, which can support low latency in the metro areas where we're available. Or you're looking at our 5G services with things like wavelength. Even closer to the edge, we have services like our IoT family of services, and we have Snow products, which are designed for the rugged edge. These are typically sites where you may not have as much connectivity, and you may face specific adverse operating conditions that really require a lot of ruggedization. We'll be focusing on the middle sector of this today and Outposts. And what Outposts brings to our customers and what differentiates it from other solutions you might see out there is that we're bringing you the same AWS designed infrastructure, and you can see examples of this right here, to your premises. This is designed by our teams. It uses the Nitro system, which is the same system we use to run instances in the cloud. And it's fully managed and operated by AWS, just like we would operate infrastructure that's sitting in one of our DCs. So that means that we're consistently monitoring the health of this equipment. We're pushing patches and updates that make sure that you're getting the performance you need for your applications. It also gives you a single pane of management. Because we use consistent equipment and we have connectivity from the outpost back to the region, that means that you can use tools that you're familiar with and that you're already developing with today to deploy at the edge. I mentioned the Outpost Rack a little bit earlier. This is a photo here. You can also check it out on our showroom floor. It is a standard 42U high rack. It comes fully assembled. So if you order this online, we'll get a configuration from you. We will rack and stack all of those servers and cable them together. It's installed by AWS, so we send a team out to your site. And it has DC power, redundant active components like our networking switches. It's awesome. Like, these are very powerful units. They're great to run in a data center or co-location facility. However, you may be looking at this and saying, it's a little bit bigger than what I had imagined when I started thinking about the edge. And that's the kind of problem that customers have been bringing to us. They've said, I like the idea of Outposts. I like the consistency that you provide. I need something that's a little bit smaller. And that's why we're thrilled to be launching Outpost Servers. You can see them right here. They're available in 1 and 2 rack unit sizes. And they're going to allow our customers to bring AWS to many more edge sites. They're designed to provide consistent high-performance compute at things like cell towers, retail locations, or healthcare clinics. They can fit into most consistent spaces where you have like an IT closet, you might have networking gear available today, and they have lower overall power draw and bandwidth requirements than a full rack of equipment would. So this is great because you're getting a little chunk of the cloud, and it can come out to your site and fit into space that you have available. They are a little bit loud. I wouldn't put them under my desk. They run at about 66 decibels and up, because we do have fans to keep this equipment cool. But if you have a sheltered space in the area where you're operating, they're great for enterprise IT sites. They support consistent EC2 instances that are based on Nitro. And that means that you can design and test in the cloud, and then deploy here and achieve the same performance and interface experience that you would in the cloud. So I will talk a little bit more about these servers specifically, and we'll start off with this bigger unit. This is 2 rack units high, so that's 3.5 inches for people who aren't used to racking and stacking. Maybe you're cloud native. They fit into a standard 19-inch width rack, and they're 30 inches deep. They support up to 128 vCPU, 256 GB of RAM, and up to 4 2-terabyte disks of NVMe SSD. So that kind of maps out to a C6 ID 32 extra large instance. We also have a lighter weight configuration that gives you a 16 extra large instance. They require 0.4 up to 1.5 kVA of power, and we have 10 gig networking ports on the front. They also have an interface that's used for initial installation, which I will talk about, and a Nitro security key. What the Nitro security key is used for is cryptographically shredding the media that's present on these servers. So at the end of your term use, when we're removing equipment from the site, if you can't cleanly terminate all of the instances that are running, you're able to remove the key, turn a screw, and that effectively shreds any information that would have been present on this physical hardware. We also have our Graviton-based instances here. These use a Graviton 2 processor. They're available in a 1U form factor, so that's half as high, 1 3/4 inches. They're the same width, so they fit into 19-inch racks, and they're 24 inches deep. So this would support up to a C6GD 16 extra large instance with Graviton 2 consistent with what you can run in the region today. They do have a slightly lower power draw, but they have the same 10 gig networking interface, installation port, and Nitro security key present on them. It's cool. You've seen servers before. We think these are extra nice servers, so we're really excited. But if all they did was run processors, provide you with memory and storage, I don't think that that would be the innovative thing that you typically expect from a big AWS launch. So I'll talk more about the experience that we can provide once you get these servers up and running. We've thought a lot about customers who have large workloads, because in the cloud, we've optimized our tooling and our developer experience to help people with a whole fleet of instances that they need to scale up and run and manage. So when we were thinking, what could we do that's special and that helps people in a different way at the edge, we thought a lot about folks who want to provide a consistent standard deployment across many sites. Examples of this include retail stores or branch offices, where you may be running things like a point of sale system, administering a local network. You want to integrate different IoT data and provide a smooth operational flow for whatever colleagues you have working at that site. We thought about healthcare providers, where you might be creating some sort of application that a lot of different hospitals want to use. You want to be consistent. You want to provide high quality of care that you can manage and troubleshoot remotely. We also thought about operational facilities like factories or distribution centers, where again, you have a standard application, you need to do that in a lot of places, and you want to continue innovating. So you might deploy something new as your processes evolve and you gain new insights. The Outpost service itself is consistent with what we do for Outpost racks. So under the hood, when you get started with Outposts, what you're doing is creating a logical construct, which is what we call an Outpost itself. And this will group all of the resources, so things like your networking configurations, the capacity associated with your server or rack together so that you can manage them logically. We then extend that architecture from the data center, where you're associated with an availability zone. So that's where you're going to interact with that AZ for any resource updates, launching new instances, creating new clusters. And then we extend that over a service link, so a network path that you provide and establish, to include subnets that are within the same VPC on your site. With Outpost servers, we are introducing something called a local network interface, which will allow you to surface a layer 2 presence over the network that you're mapping to on premises. And once you get that set up, you can use the unique Outpost ID that's associated with those logical resources to tag, update, and manage a whole fleet. So you start to imagine, as you're lighting all of these different sites up, you have Outpost IDs, you can use tags for grouping and management, and you can easily monitor the health of all of the resources that you have on premises using things like CloudWatch. You can also deploy updates using CloudFormation or Systems Manager. One of the big things that we heard from our customers is that getting new applications or updates to existing applications out to sites is really challenging. So for Outposts, you just do that the same way that you would if you were running in the AWS region. Each server will be associated with the logical outpost, so each of these is its own pool of capacity. And one thing that a lot of customers are looking at is setting up 2 or 3 of these side by side, mapping them to different AZs, and then configuring over their local network application awareness of other devices, other Outpost pools for higher availability and failover. What's great is that in addition to having this logical construct that you set up in VPC networking, we also support other services like EC2 instances with instant storage. So again, our Gen 6 Intel and Graviton 2 instances are available on these form factors. Container services like Amazon ECS. We have Amazon EKS coming soon as well. And you can run IoT workloads. So you can use AWS Greengrass or SageMaker Neo, deploy that to instances running on the Outpost, and you could use that as an MQTT broker with Greengrass, or to run trained models that you're deploying with Neo. Once those are up and running, as shown here, it extends your VPC. So while we only have a subset of services that are available local to the Outpost capacity, one of the things that's really great is because you're within the same VPC networking, you can connect back to services in region. So you could be aggregating data locally, processing it with compute, and then sending findings or insights back to S3 in the region, services like DynamoDB, and then using all of those management tools like IAM to make sure that the right folks have access to the right set of resources. You can also use this local network interface to easily communicate between your applications sitting within the VPC and communicating over your existing ENI, then communicating over this new LNI interface to your local network over the 10 gig physical interfaces that we have supported on the device itself. That allows you to architect seamlessly across on-premises and in region. So something that we think is going to be a big game changer is starting to help customers think more flexibly about where they're deploying applications based on the specific networking you might have available in a given geography. So if I'm looking around the world, I have 100 different manufacturing sites, the chances that all of them have the same networking SLA from my provider, the same amount of bandwidth, the same kind of physical environment where I'm operating is pretty slim. I might be doing something in the LA area where I could run in a local zone. That's awesome. But I could also be looking at a site in Indonesia where it's a lot harder for me to get high quality, high throughput networking that I want so I can run everything in the region first. If I build an application and I start using Outposts, I can deploy an Outpost there, and I can manage and maintain that in the same way as I am capacity running in my local zone. This also allows customers to think a little bit more flexibly about failover. So for example, if you don't want to have full redundancy on site, maybe you're doing something latency sensitive, if your primary on-premises equipment has an issue, you could fail over to the region, and the impact may be slightly higher end user latency, but it's giving you that flexible architecture so you can think about the right place to start and to fail over if you run into any issues. For me, as this global operator, I'm looking for a service that can meet me where I need it. So we're excited to be launching Outpost Servers in 49 different countries and territories. The Outpost service itself is available in 21 different commercial AWS regions, so that if you're running in a country that doesn't have a region present, you can network back from that equipment to the closest nearby region. Some customers are also interested, for various reasons, in putting equipment a little bit farther away and then mapping back to their preferred region, and we can support that within about 150 millisecond round-trip latency. So you can think about different places that you might tether local equipment back to the region that you prefer. The other thing that we're really excited about is being able to bring a rich partner ecosystem with us to Outposts and to the edge. So as part of our launch, we worked with folks like Pure Storage and Cloudian to support their storage services on Outpost servers, with networking partners like Cisco and VMware to support SD-WAN running on Outpost capacity, with CloudStrike for security, with Athonet and Mavenir, who support things like private 5G software, and with travel and hospitality partners, including Vistry, who you'll hear from later, and Shiji. This is just where we're starting. We have a very rich partner ecosystem in the region, and because we surface consistent resources, it makes it easy for our partners to build, get started, and then start supporting customers where they're looking for infrastructure, whether that's in a region, in a local zone, or closer to the edge. So I can tell the excitement in the room is getting a little bit electric. You guys are all eager to get started and order these. What I will talk through is some of the considerations that you might have in mind when you're ready to start installing an Outpost server. So we'll talk about ordering. We'll talk about one of the other areas of innovation that we have with this product, our DIY install experience, and how you can get started launching resources. When you're thinking about whether or not your site would be a fit for Outpost servers, we're looking for either a flat space where you could lay the servers, you have kind of airflow, access. We do have front power and networking, if that's a consideration for you, although we can work with you if you typically have back power and make sure we provide the right equipment to get cabling in an organized fashion. So if you have a lot of other networking stuff on site, you would look at a standard EIA 310 19-inch width rack to mount these in, a 4-post rack. And you would look for a space where if there is fan noise, that's going to be acceptable. So maybe like not next to an infant's nursery, perhaps not in a classroom where teaching is happening, somewhere a little bit sheltered from noise. This site should have networking connectivity back to the AWS region so that these servers are able to talk to the management plane and the way that you're scaling up resources. That also gives you the ability to monitor and update the equipment. And we can do that over an internet connection or by using AWS Direct Connect. You will need to provide an on-site resource or a third party who can physically do the install, because what we'll be doing is shipping you a box that includes the server, cabling, and a simple process of directions. So we're working with many partners to qualify their Smart Hands resources, and if you're looking to engage in that ecosystem, that's certainly a model that we can support. And then we do have an enterprise support requirement. So for customers, you need to have enterprise support in order to be able to use Outpost servers. You've checked out your site. You've decided, my garage is the perfect space for me to get started with my new business, and I want to install an Outpost server. You would go into the management console or CLI, and I'm going to be walking through how we do this in the console because it's a little bit more visual, but these are also things that are supported over the AWS CLI. And you'll create a site resource. This is how we know where to ship stuff, When I talk about the repair model, it's also how we'll know where equipment's monitoring if there's an issue and we need to ship you a replacement. Then you'll create that outpost, that logical pool of capacity, and you can associate tags with that. So when I think about my 100-site factory, I could be tagging equipment associated with certain applications or certain business units in a different way so that it's easy for me to identify what my fleet looks like and introduce different hierarchy or labels that help me manage that fleet over time. Then you can select one of our device SKUs from the catalog. So you'll see 3 server SKUs in the catalog today and a bunch more rack SKUs. We do have AC and DC power options. Only AC is listed in the catalog, but you can contact us if you're interested in using DC, and we can get you the right configuration for that site. And once the order is submitted, you'll be able to track your order status and get updates and notifications as we move from processing your order to shipping something out to your site. So I will show you what this looks like. So you can see here, we get started in the management console and go check out the catalog. I figure I need a 16 extra large with an Intel processor. I prefer x86. I'm looking, I can see, oh, weight looks good, power looks good for my site. So then I simply add that unit to my cart. I'd like to create a new outpost for this, so I didn't have an outpost set up before. It's easy for me to go in, name my outpost. I could add a description if there's a note that I want to make and be able to access and look up later. And then this is important, I will choose an availability zone. This is going to create a logical resource anchor. You cannot change this later. We will alert, we will give you the red triangle warning, so please be thoughtful about that piece of the process. At this point, all I have to do is tell you where it should be sent to. Maybe I'm doing something here in Vegas, the networking quality isn't great, I'm getting a little frustrated, I might want to install some of my own infrastructure for lower latency access. Enter a street address and you'll be able to see what our supported countries are, where you can be placing these orders to. And we're going to maintain this address as the place where the equipment is operating. We will also give you the option to tell us somewhere different to ship it, and that would allow you to indicate, hey, I actually have a receiving facility or another spot where I want the package to be arriving at. I can look over and I can choose from different payment options. So similar to reserved instances, you can pay all upfront, no upfront, or partially upfront for a 3-year term, and confirm where you want things to be shipped. From this point forward, you check things out, make sure everything looks okay, and you're pretty much ready to go. So we'll submit the order, and you'll be able to see what the order status is from this point forward until we have shipped the equipment onto your site, and you'll be able to get started with the delivery and installation portion of this experience, which I'll talk about. I think it's a 5-star ordering experience, but you can also send us feedback through the console if you have other comments or suggestions, and you'll be able to come back to this page to monitor progress as we move forward with fulfilling your order. So I've placed my order. It gets to the Venetian. These both arrive in boxes with shock sensors so that you would be able to quickly tell if somebody ran a truck or dropped the outpost out of a building on the way, in which case you would contact us, we would send you a new unit and a very nasty note to our shipping provider about what they were doing with our beautiful servers. And at this point, you unbox the server. It does come with power and networking cables, as well as a single-page sheet. So like if you can put together IKEA furniture, this should be something that you can generally follow. Not everybody loves doing this, so you could use a trained technician. I do love putting together IKEA furniture, so I'm always excited about this part of any given process. You would take the servers, rack mount them, and then connect them to networking and power. We also have an interface in here that's a USB port that you'll use to connect to your laptop, and you will present AWS credentials there, and we have some ways that you can issue those credentials to third parties as well securely, just to make sure that you're the right person, so that if Joe Schmo off the street picks up your server, they can't install that and then connect back to the resources that you have in region. Once you enter credentials, you'll be able to tell, can this reach outside of my site? Can I phone home, establish an IP, get the right IP address, and establish a connection back to the region? And then once this happens, I, as the installer, am pretty much done. I can walk away, and you, as the person who ordered it, are able to see my outpost is connected, it's provisioning, and then once capacity comes online, it will be marked as active. And that means that you can get started launching EC2 instances and deploying your application. So at this point, you would be able to create a subnet. You can start launching instances to that outpost, including instance-attached disk storage. Another innovation that we have here is we do support EBS-backed AMIs, and they can launch off the disk storage present on these units. So you are able to use the AMIs that you would typically be running in region and deploy them to the local capacity. You can associate that VPC with your local network over the LNI, and then you can use management tools that you have like CloudFormation, CloudWatch, you can tag resources, and that allows you to get started with this. The other piece is that you can configure the capacity on these units. So they're by default configured with .4 extra large instances, but in Outpost racks, over time, you can recarve that capacity up if you need smaller instance sizes, you want to run as one really big instance on each server. And one of the things that's great is that gives you flexibility. Over time, if your application needs change, you can make this unit appear as the logical resource size that you would need for whatever you happen to be doing that month or that quarter. So when it's connected, these guys look like normal subnets, normal instances. They have an extra Outpost ID associated with them, but you can use your preferred cloud tools. And that is really going to allow our customers working across many different verticals to start standardizing and deploying with cloud-native constructs at the edge. So whether that's the use cases that we've talked about or something new that you and your team are working on, this is AWS Compute. It does a lot of different things. And one of the things that's been exciting for me as a product manager is hearing from partners and customers as we launch this service about new things that they want to build, deploy, and that we can enable by bringing Outposts to their site. So at this point, I'm excited to bring up one of those partners who is going to talk a little bit more about how his team is thinking about designing for the edge with Outposts. So I'm excited to introduce Atif Qureshi, who's the founder of Vistry AI, one of our Outposts launch partners.
All right. Oh. Okay, well, great introduction by Tatiana. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I am the founder of Vistry, and let me just get my equipment here settled. I'll hold on to this. So who we are a startup focused on restaurant automation. And restaurant automation for us means deploying capabilities to the edge at the restaurant to enable machine and deep learning workloads that understand voice, computer vision, and IoT sensor data. And the reason why we do that is because we see a lot of restaurants, very large brands and concepts that manage, potentially thousands of restaurants. They're looking to deploy smart capabilities into their restaurants to have more automation to drive speed of service and quality of service. So what does that mean to you and I as consumers? All of us through the pandemic have changed the way we interact with restaurants and we eat. So while we would love to have a dining experience like we did pre-pandemic, the reality is a lot of us have changed those behaviors, and we may now order digitally through our preferred aggregator delivery partner and expect that meal or that order to come to our house in a timely manner with all of the customizations that we may have made and that food served to us hot. Now, the reality is that doesn't always happen. And generally, the statistics across the industry is that 25 to 40% of all off-premises orders, which means delivery, pickup, curbside, or drive-through, typically have some issue with them. And these issues could be really long wait times, could be cold items, could be missing items, could be an inaccurate order. And again, we all know this. We're experiencing it every day. So we took a look at this, and when we were diagnosing exactly what's happening, we recognized that there is a big gap, a big digital gap in the capabilities that exist within the restaurant. And so the challenges that these restaurant operators are facing is how to get an efficient technology infrastructure into their restaurant so that they can connect their kitchens and make more sense of what's happening. So what we've done, and actually a demonstration that we did over the course of this week, I do hope that you all got a chance to come visit the Outpost booth in the Village. So we were showing a smart coffee setup. And in that setup, we had several IoT devices, IoT sensors for temperature and humidity, both ambient and of the coffee within the coffee pot. And we were collecting that sensor data, and we were also deploying cameras to look at coffee cups as they were sitting on a tabletop. And the opportunity here is that if we understand what's actually happening in the physical environment, as that coffee sits or is taking too long and starts to cool down, we can alert or notify, let's say, a supervisor or manager to make sure that that coffee is served fresher or that the customers aren't waiting. So in this instance, we were running all of that compute at the edge on Outposts. And that entire experience was very seamless for us. We deployed our software stack, which runs in the region typically using all the tools that you would come to expect between CloudFormation, our containerized microservices running on EC2. And we were able to deploy that to the 2U instance seamlessly. And so we were then able to run that edge stack, collect all of that IoT sensor data, as well as do our inference pipelines there at the edge with very low latency and high throughput. So this was very effective for us, and we are working with several customers that are interested in deploying this model across their brand. So with that, I'd love to give you a closer look at the architecture of how we set this up. And so I'd like to call up Josh Cohen, who's a solution architect on the Outpost team, and he will describe to you how we put this together.
Hey, thanks, Latif. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Josh Cohen, solutions architect on the Outpost team here at AWS. So here's an architecture diagram of what we did. We had to be pretty scrappy about this. We knew kind of last minute that there was going to be space down in the expo hall to actually bring servers down to show everybody. So we had 2 weeks, and we're like, we're going to bring these down. What can we do? So we thought, well, this was a good use case, and we know Vistry, so we partnered with the Vistry team to say, hey, what can we show folks? And you may have been down in the expo hall and seen like the serverless espresso. They have a pretty fancy setup, probably a $5,000, $10,000 espresso machine and a bunch of stuff. In 2 weeks, we kind of just had to buy like a $100 coffee maker and do some things. So what that meant was it wasn't going to be very smart, and it's not going to give us telemetry. There's no API. When most consumer coffee makers that are smart means you can turn it off and on with an app and set a schedule. That's not really what we're looking for here. You go to coffee shops that have high-end machines, they can tell you the temperature of the boilers. They can tell you a whole lot of things about the machine. So instead, what we did was we bought some IoT sensors. We hooked up like a Raspberry Pi in order to kind of make this smart, which kind of a dumb coffee machine, into a smart coffee machine for this demo. So the other hiccup we had was we only had 2 weeks. These weren't GA. We couldn't just send Atif and his team a server. So what they did was they used the region to start doing work on the same instance type that they were going to deploy onto the server. So while they did that, I was writing the code to make the coffee machine smart. And then we all gathered here on Sunday and loaded it up and got it working. So this is an architecture of what it looks like. I'm going to try this little pointer here. I'm not sure that's going to be successful. So on the left is the region. It's very standard things over there. We have a VPC. It's a US West 2. There's a VPC. And then we have availability zones. So what we do, the VPC isn't outpost aware. And the way that we extend a VPC to an outpost, whether it's the server form factor or a rack, is by the subnet. So you create a subnet with an outpost identifier, which means anytime you launch an instance on that subnet, it's going to launch on the outpost. So we extended a VPC over to the Outpost server. We deployed the Vistry Discern platform on top of it, and then which has some things underneath. It's a container platform running Grafana, running InfluxDB, and then a lot of their vision platform that is actually taking the camera stream and doing things with it, like having cups on a table, and as you put a cup on the table, the camera can capture and go through to the Vistry stack and assign an object ID to that. So now as things are moving in and out of the camera, it can start detecting things like how long has the cup been there, how many cups are there, and then you can start to interact and maybe perform an action like send a message to somebody or perform any kind of action with that data. So we deployed that on the Outpost server, and then we had the camera stream coming in to the Vistry stack, as well as all the IoT data that was being pushed from the sensors into the InfluxDB. And then what we did was we created a Grafana dashboard to display all of it. So we pulled the RTSP stream into Grafana, we pulled all the sensor data into Grafana, and then started reporting on ambient temperature, humidity of the room, temperature of the coffee in the coffee pot, how many cups are actually on the table, how long have the cups been on the table. And then at the same time, we're monitoring like how much resources is all of this consuming on the Outpost server. And it was actually surprisingly small. I wish we had a screenshot to share with you. But this is just like one example. Like really no one is gonna, what we did, no coffee operator would ever do it like that. They're not gonna have like a Grafana dashboard up and like be monitoring it. But the idea here is that you can get some data either just for that restaurant from the edge, or if you have 1,000 restaurants or 1,000 coffee shops, you can really start to see where there are operational inefficiencies or where you can improve like a customer experience. Maybe you have data that says your best performing store, none of the cups for customers will sit there longer than 3 minutes, but the worst performing store, they're longer than 5 minutes. So the demo isn't really to showcase like how cool this coffee machine is, because it wasn't that cool, but the idea of what you can do with things like Vistry and Outpost servers at the edge. So I'll have Tatiana come back up and, yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Great.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks, Tatiana.
Okay. So thank you so much to Atif and Josh for joining and talking a little bit about what they and the Vistry solution pulled together for our demo here at reInvent this week. We're really excited because now this server solution is going to be in the hands of all of our creative customers and partners around the world as part of the way that AWS is bringing new services to your premises. So from IoT devices where maybe you're capturing that coffee information or interacting with things on premises, to the rugged disconnected edge, to your on-premises site where you can run Outposts, and then thinking about 5G networks in the cloud, we're introducing different kinds of services that you can easily manage to help you where you and your customers are today. So I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to learn more, we have information like pricing, country availability, more on our supported features on our website. So I really encourage you to check that out. And you'll be hearing more from us soon. We're still building, and we're really excited for where we'll be able to take the Outpost server program this year. Thank you.